kids, all of our students to be able to do independently by the time they leave Madison Public Schools. So these are all of the outcomes. I'm going to give you a look into that guiding document. Stacy, if you could click that link down at the bottom. And Jen's going to go into this a little bit more about our process. So the whole guiding document starts out with these long-term transfer goals. And these 8 transfer goals are not only examined through the lens of mathematics, but they're also matched to what we call our 21st century capacities, or our portrait of a graduate. And our portrait of a graduate, if you take a look at number 1, this committee, after they look at what the content says, then goes back and maps in our portrait of a graduate. And we identify, like for number 1, the components. Actually scroll up, Stace, a little bit to stay on the transfer goals if you can. So in number 1, we mapped back our portrait of a graduate capacities to be that one outcome would be analyzing, or it could be decision-making, or self-awareness, or design. The second one, we identified product creation and analyzing. And the third one, we added to product creation and analyzing collective intelligence. So that's just an example of the detail behind the document. In addition to that, we actually take a look at what we call priority standards. And we take a look at those priority standards that have been identified. We unpack those, and we do a lot of work with understandings and EQs. So I'm going to pass that over to Jen. So Jen, you can go into a little bit more detail on the second page and the third page of this document.
I told my team here I got if I missed anything, please fill in the missing blanks that I'm forgetting. But again, please, you can keep up with the first slide on the transfer goal. So as Gail mentioned, we used these national math practices to help us guide our transfer goals. And what the math practices are, so the first math practice is make sense of problems and persevere in solving problems. So within that heading, there's a very lengthy description that tells us what that encompasses. So as a K-12 team, and these math practices are K-12 practices, which is really, really nice. And so as a K-12 team, we came together and we unpacked that first math practice, and we really looked at the description, and we highlighted any key points or key concepts that were described in that description, and we used that description to write our transfer goals. So these are, in our own words, what we took out of math practice 1. So math practice 1 really aligns to our transfer goal 1. Math practice 2 really aligns to the second transfer goal, and so on. And it was really, really us taking our time and looking at each of those descriptions and pulling out the key components to figure out what makes the most sense for us here in Madison. Stacey, go ahead. We can scroll down to the next one. So as we were looking at each of the standards, we decided, hang on, let me go back. Once we wrote each of those transfer goals, we really spent, oh, here, this is what I wanted to show you. So here are some of those bullet points that were really important in all of that description that we wrote. So once we came up with all these bullet points, that was super helpful in helping us write our transfer goals, and also then looking at how we were going to go ahead and write our enduring understandings and our essential questions. And again, we made them really relevant for K-12. So we can go into this document in the kindergarten classroom and use these, and we can go into the second school as well. And the math practices really encompass everything. And as Gail had mentioned, we did look at the priority standards, and we decided how these fit in well. But for the most part, these math practices cover everything we need to have in mathematics. So each of in the first column, you will see that the standards, there's math practice 1, math practice 2, math practice 6. And then we went ahead and we made an enduring understanding and some essential questions to go with each one. What am I forgetting? I'm going to add some detail. Oh, I know Gail wanted us to talk about the capacities, the profile of the graduate. Yeah, so
I just wanted to mention before you leave that slide that these are really higher order thinking skills in mathematics. It's not just the doing of mathematics or the application of a certain process. Students really have to be able to pack and unpack what a question's asking them and search for a variety of ways to solve problems. It's really a higher aspiration than just teaching students how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, calculate, and follow one algorithm. So all of this, the team's common understanding is really important because Jen starts the work as early as in kindergarten. And as we're having our vertical meetings every month, we're able to take a look at how students are performing across various grade levels and really see where they're struggling, where our curriculum's really demanding, where we might be circling back to do something different in our curriculum. It really informs our practices as well and our professional development.
Thank you, Gail. And then so Stacey, if you go back into the presentation. So for new profile of the graduate, those new capacities, what we then did, as Gail mentioned, we took each of those capacities and we decided where they fell best with our transfer. So we noticed that analyzing happens all the time in mathematics. So almost for every single math practice, you will see that analyzing really works well. But we really look too, like where does the product creation fit in, or collective intelligence, or inquiry. I think we use some decision making built into our transfer goals as well. So when we're rewriting the curriculum, we could really make sure that everything aligns really nicely, so that we have a transfer goal and one of our profile of graduate that capacities that really go nicely, and then we can really use this document to look at what enduring understandings and essential questions will really best fit. And so far, I know that what we started to do was we've now started to go back and look at the curriculum, and we're starting this rewriting process this year. It's going to take us some time, but we're going back and we're realigning all of our documents with all of the new profile of the graduate capacities and all the new transfer and all the new enduring understandings and central questions. And what we're seeing is that that alignment is definitely better than where it was. There was a lot of redundancy prior in our documents. So I think this is definitely going to be cleaner. It's going to be easier to read. It's going to be more user friendly, and it definitely is going to make more sense in terms of getting our kids to that higher level thinking with that transfer. Yeah.
So I think one of our celebrations in mathematics and ELA is that our teachers are writers. They sit around the table. We do not write it ourselves, all of the units, because we want our teachers to make meaning of the standards and what the grade level expectations are, what the assessments are that we'll be using, and what the unit should include, and what our formative assessments will look like. So it's really a piece of professional development for our teachers to be writers with us. But the people who you see in this room are the people who facilitate all of that writing. They are the people who work with every single team who is writing to make sure that they're lifting the best efforts of the guiding document, and they're making sure that our promised outcomes for all students are there. So that team has to have this really in-depth understanding of what this document means. So every single teacher who's a writer is using the guiding document. That creates that vertical alignment that we love, as well as our promised outcomes for our students. So it's something that is definitely part of Madison's curriculum writing. I can't say that many districts use guiding documents to the depth and breadth that we do, but we find that it's given us great results for our students. So that's our part on the guiding document, and I'd love to welcome any questions that the committee has for myself or anybody on the team before we go on to our curriculum writing process.
Gail, can you describe also how the guiding document maps back to the district mission?
Yeah. So the guiding document, as we talked about, the profile of the graduate is actually a product of the mission. We actually took a look at the vision and the mission of the district some time ago, and we pulled out the 5 categories of critical thinking, creative thinking, communication, and collaboration, as well as global thinking and self-direction. The self-direction category is actually a new one. We went through a revisitation of the profile of a graduate just before the pandemic. So that was that wonderful year before the pandemic. We had a multi-stakeholder group, including teachers, administrators, students, parents, meet over, and board members actually meet over several days, because our original profile of a graduate had what we call 15 indicators or capacities, and a little bit different headings. So out of that committee, we really took a look at what we wanted students to be able to do. And we did a lot of changing to that piece in order to make sure that vision was really becoming embedded into every curriculum unit that we write. So it's not just math, it's not just ELA, it's every single content we write has 1 or 2 of these embedded in. So students are getting feedback on those individual elements throughout their schooling, starting in kindergarten. They see these terms on their rubrics. They get feedback in their report card, actually, starting K through 5. We did do that before the pandemic. So students are really aware of how they're growing to be really good critical thinkers and really good global citizens and really self-directed. And there's certainly more work that we look forward to doing once it's not a pandemic, but it doesn't mean that we leave off and we don't continue where we see our next steps. So pandemic or not, we continue to look at our curriculum and make sure that it is promising not only the vision, but the content that it needs to deliver as well.
I don't have a question, but I would like to editorialize for a minute. And this is primarily for the benefit of the public that attends and others. I mean, the role of the curriculum committee is for everyday citizens, neighbors, looking at and approving curriculum and the practices that take place in the district. You know, one might ask, how do everyday people, most of who are not educators, do that? What is the process for that? You know, and that is on the cusp of what Steph says, because what we do is we look at the guiding document of the mission statement of the theory of action, which was developed by the community by a broad consortium of hubs that basically speaks to what do we want for the outcomes for kids coming out of Madison Public Schools. So we attend these meetings and we listen to your presentations of what we're constantly doing is connecting to, is this serving and contributing to what the community said should be the outcome of our public school system. So, you know, in line with such statements of asking the question, how does this connect with what is our Bible, our guiding documents of the mission statement and action plan? I appreciate, you know, to the degree that you speak to that and that we start with the idea of what are the guiding principles, because we can get lost in the granular work easily and lose track of the overall picture of how that's going to impact. Thank you for hearing my editorial.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to have the team continue now with really taking a look at where we are in curriculum work. This will give you a more detailed look at that history that I introduced in the beginning of our presentation.
Yeah, and some things that I wanted to highlight in this timeline is about the Bridges adoption that we did almost 10 years ago. And that change, I feel like, was the catalyst coming from below, pushing the other grades to make some changes. And one of the big changes was going to a more conceptual approach to teaching. So away from or procedural approach, and still using algorithms, but making sure that kids had a meaning for that. So that was almost 10 years ago. 5 years ago, like Gail said, we rewrote the curriculum. I would say the middle schools and high school tried to adopt that idea of building in a conceptual approach so that students understood where the math was coming from. There's a mathematical beauty to it, a magical beauty to mathematics, but that's not, we don't want it to be magic to them. We want them to understand where it's coming from. So that was 5 years ago. And then as part of that curriculum writing process, now we are at the time that we should have naturally been revising it, the curriculum. So like Jen said, the elementary school levels, that is what they're doing. They are looking at the documents, refining them. At the middle school level, also like Gail mentioned, when we were writing this curriculum and at the high school level, we could not get material that supported the Common Core. With the standards, we could support the Common Core, but not with the idea of how to teach it. So books would have Common Core stamped across the front of them, but it was the same book as it was 2 years ago, new cover. A few years ago, we started, Stacy and I and the middle school teachers started using illustrative math. It's available online. It's a free program that came from Race to the Top, along with some other programs, especially Engage New York was one that we used heavily. But we've landed on this as something that we feel will move us forward, not just in the conceptual approach, but more in the problem-solving approach. So a frustration that we had as teachers was just the students' inability to take a novel problem and move forward with it. This program, that's one of the main things it addresses, because it's a problem-solving approach where students are asked to wrestle with problems a bit. It's called a productive struggle. So just the right amount of struggle, not too much that it's so frustrating, but not so easy that they do not have to think. Sixth grade last year fully did about 3 units using the illustrative math. 7th and 8th grade did not do as much full unit work because of the way math is sequential. We felt that we had to dive into it completely. Last spring, we had some professional development. We have a trainer come from CREC. She's certified with illustrative math to give this professional development. But what we love, Stacey and I love about using Lindsay Ramos through CREC is saving the district money. We pay CREC prices instead of illustrative math. And also, she doesn't have to follow their canned program when we hire her through CREC. So before we meet, and we've done it, how many days have we done it this year? Two this year. We tell her what we think our needs are and also ask her, what do you think we need? And so we have a little balance of getting what we want and what she thinks we need. It's fantastic. We have more days coming up later this year with her, and we'll do the same thing. So this year, all 3 grades, 6, 7, and 8 are using illustrative math. Have I missed anything? Let me look at my notes. No, I think I'm on it. And actually, one thing I wanted to point out, that's right, it does have to be in there, is that our special ed teachers were part of that PD in the summer when we worked on units. And the first time we had Lindsay Ramos, just trying to make sure that they are moving along with us. Just wanted to highlight that we are proud of our work. You know, the SBAC scores. This week, one of the teachers said to me, I feel like you never think things will be perfect. And I said, I think that's how we have to act as a team, is that things are never going to be perfect. And we're always going to be looking to find what we do and make it better. And that's what we're doing with this team. And then Stacey's going to talk a little bit about some of the changes.
So one of the things we started doing last year related to the SBAC was we started giving IAB, interim assessment blocks. And we hadn't given them before. We really hadn't gotten into the depth of what do the questions look like, how do we use them. So last year, we would teach our unit, then we would find an IAB that was aligned with it and give it. And This year, over the summer, we were able to look at the IEDs again, decide which ones we thought were the ones we really wanted information from. And recently, sixth grade just finished up doing some units on ratios and proportional reasoning. And so we gave that IAB, and I started looking at the results and I'm like, these are good. And I happened to have last year. So on this particular question, last year, 57% of our kids answered it correctly. And this year, 91% of our kids answered it accurately. And I can tell you for certain that this type of question is the type of question that's in illustrative mathematics. So while we were, searching out there for the kinds of problems that we wanted to hit ratios and proportions, we didn't quite aim into what was fully aligned with what's being assessed. And so this has been a huge success to us. And we can see this in a lot of different areas. We've had good curriculum. It's not that this is replacing something and, miraculous. We had good assessment questions too. This was a typical assessment that was on one of our sixth grade math assessments for ratios. And it has multiple parts to it. It asked the kids to think about things, and these are actual examples from last year. Last year, the sixth graders had this on an assessment. So you can see they're using ratio tables. You can see that they're putting different equations and pieces into that. And we were really happy with that. This year, as we're starting to use more of the assessments from illustrative, what we're seeing is that kind of thinking, but then also raising it to a higher level. So this question's still dealing with ratios. However, instead of just saying, find these two ratios and figure out which one's larger, this one is one of those, like, there's two people coming from different directions and where do they merge? And our kids did amazing. And again, you see that ratio table type work, but now it's not just a 2-column one, it's a 4-column one, where the kids are really trying to put all those pieces together. And the students have really risen to that opportunity, getting, as Carol said, those richer problems that we were looking for.
And as a high school person, this is impressive. I tell you. Okay, what I chose to highlight in grade 8.
Wait,
I'm
hold on
sorry.
a second. Go ahead.
Now, this process, as I understand the curriculum, this is done in small groups or between students. So this isn't one individual student grappling with the problem. This is, they're interacting with each other.
So
Is that correct?
the example, what you just saw was one student doing it on their own on an assessment. But on a daily basis in the classroom, yeah, it's kids working together in small groups and partners. It's been a challenge with COVID. We keep our 3 feet now, but yeah, they're working on it together. They're talking about it. When you walk through a math classroom, the amount of discussion is amazing. And when you start to hear like the vocabulary that they're using as well to discuss these problems, it's really impressive.
That is a distinct difference from what used to be your conventional process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's moving away from the teacher standing up and saying, here's the example, now you go practice it, to we're going to use this problem to figure out how it works. And then at the end, going back and kind of summarizing, this is how it works. So it kind of takes things in a different direction.
Thank you.
We're still using a differentiated learning model, right, where we assist students that need more assistance, or even give some extra work to students who are excelling. Without getting into detail, can I just ask more or less yes or no? I assume that the special education teachers are involved, to the extent that you're able to create a learning environment for some of the special needs learners who don't pick up and maybe don't learn as well in this group environment.
So it's interesting like that, like if, for example, a couple weeks before the holidays, Carol and I met with one of the special educators and core math teachers, and we looked at what are the kids going to learn in the classroom and what are our key points we need the kids to get out of that. And then how does the special education teacher meet the needs of her students based on their individual needs? Because every kid needs, every kid learns differently. But we were able to basically keep them within the illustrative program, but just, maybe change what the problem looks like. Maybe give them some extra organizers to figure out how they're going to get started with a problem. Maybe, split the problem down into less parts so that they can access it better.
Great. Thank you.
I just want to also add that one of the things that's unique about the system that we use when we write curriculum, it's called Eduplanet, and it's a web-based product. So everybody in the district has logins and they can access all the different disciplines and all the different units. So a special education teacher is a generalist, right? They're in charge of lots of different subject areas, but they can go into Eduplanet and they can see what the students are expected to do in every unit. And they can actually look at the lessons and the assessments that are coming too. So if they don't have time for that face-to-face collaborative work that Stacy was describing all the time, they still have access to everything that's current in a unit and what their students will be expected to do, which is a huge help for any modifications that need to be done. Thanks. I just wanted to add that.
I just wanted to add that with illustrative math that has all these instructional routines that involve productive struggle and critical thinking and a lot of discussing your thought process, it can be really difficult for kids to put it out there and take risks in the classroom. So that's something that might be a little different for some kids. And teachers have a lot of tools to overcome social anxiety that kids might be dealing with. There are technologies that you can use to have students report anonymously and share them. The kids get really excited about that. Or on a voluntary basis, kids can share what they're thinking. And the teachers are aware of the students' accommodations. And sometimes it'll say in there, the student needs to be prompted and given time to think before they respond. So teachers are aware of that and they take that into consideration.
Thank you.
The illustrative math does not extend beyond grade 8. Is grade 8 the ceiling on that?
High school.
But it's fairly new. So that's going to be, and that's part of this tonight that we're going to talk about maybe using that. We're using that in algebra.
And I can add to that for the elementary level, they actually just introduced the K5 this past year. So as soon as I heard these guys talk about how interested and excited they were about it, as we began rewriting some of our curriculum, we started using some of the illustrative materials too. So yes, we have Bridges as one of our main resources, but now it's awesome because the teachers have illustrative too as a resource. So it's been great. Any other? I chose this grade 8 example because I think it's fairly typical of our old approach versus our new. So this is the unit, it's what we're doing right now. The unit that's on solving equations with a variable on both sides. I think this might have been the very first lesson or task. And talking about the differentiating, I have a couple of kids that don't read well, and I know they have a visual issue, that dyslexia, that type of thing. If I had given them, and I would not have in the past, given them an equation with a variable on both sides, and this one actually has 3 variables, not just one, which is the way I would have done it. I don't think they would have been successful. I didn't even try it, so I'm not positive. But what they did was match it up to a hanger, and then the hangers
that's showing us solving a problem, actually getting to that smaller hanger. I do know who was one of the first people to do this and do it quickly and figure out values of the triangle, the square, and all that. And that person has dyslexia. So I think it's kind of neat that where I think someone might struggle, that's not always the case. So the first time teaching anything, that's the part of the learning process for me, is what's going to be tricky, what's going to be easier, what misconceptions there are. So we would have in the past with an equation with a variable on both sides, probably given them an equation with a variable on both sides and said, what looks different compared to what we've done in the past? Students end up noticing there's a variable on both sides. What do you think we could do to change that to look like something we are used to? But a visual model is not something that we would have involved. So I love that approach because it then can be used for that whole unit. And then Heather, I think, has one, from 8th grade. So then we haven't even talked about the fact that now the high school, the 8th grade algebra and the high school algebra are planning to use this next year. So this year in grade 7 and 8 are typical courses. Grade 7 math and grade 8, we call it pre-algebra, are using illustrative math. And then next year, both those grades will bring in illustrative math to the more advanced classes, the algebra in 8th grade and the pre-algebra in 7th.
So now I'm going to talk about the transition into the high school, kind of the before and after in Algebra 1, which I currently teach. So we used to have the textbooks, we used to have the problems, and like Carol said, they stamped Common Core and added a couple more problems, but it still wasn't, they still weren't rich and thought-provoking and conducive to collaboration. So Connecticut came up with a model curriculum, I would say about 10 years ago.
Yep.
And in my previous district, and then here, we used this for Algebra 1, and you were able to choose the experiences you wanted and put them together in packets. The kids were coming home with packets instead of textbooks. And the packets included the traditional types of problems and also some labs. And then teachers kind of went above and beyond and created their own learning experiences as well to supplement. This is an example of a problem in the solving equations unit. So you can see this here. And this, I chose this one because I actually use it when we solve equations. And it's just, it's so representative of the Connecticut curriculum in that it's super scaffolded. So if you look, it says, it gives you a scenario about 3 friends going to a fair. And if you just stop here at the question, you can write an equation and solve it. But it breaks it down into what is the unknown cost, what is the known cost, write an expression. And the kids intuitively just wanted to go and solve it. They didn't want to do all the minutia that required, Then down here we get to, if you follow the steps correctly, your equation should have a pair of parentheses in it. Well, when I give them this problem, I have all different kinds of setups that I like to put on the board and have the kids discuss which ones are the same as others. This one kind of is prescriptive. And then it says, how are we going to get rid of the parentheses? It kind of like holds their hand and walks them through the problem instead of letting them kind of struggle with it. And there shouldn't be much struggle for that. So it was like a little too scaffolded. So as teachers, we would, delete all this or even take away the question, say, what do you think the problem's going to ask for? So we went and edited the state curriculum and kind of supplemented as we needed. And so I'm going to give you an example from illustrative. This is a similar type of situation here. If you're looking to set up an equation. The drama club is printing t-shirts for its members. The printing company charges a certain amount for each surplus. The setup fee is $40. There are 21 students. And then you have 2 scenarios. In the first one, if there are 21 students and the total is 187, how much does each t-shirt cost? It doesn't tell you to write an equation. It doesn't break it down into a million steps. It just asks you to figure it out and show your reasoning. So this is an instance where you could have students working independently at first, and then talking to a neighbor and discussing strategies, putting them up on the board, having the kids write their work online, and the teacher can pull up and show different approaches and compare. So it's really a rich problem for discourse in the classroom. And then we have another situation. Here's another equation representing the cost of printing a shirt with another printing company. Find the solution, state what it represents. Then you could even take it further. How does this compare with an equation you could write for this one? And you can get into slope, and you can get into the y-intercept. So it has a lot of opportunities for the teachers to go forward with it. It's just a simple problem. I had the pleasure of sitting in on the PD with Lindsay Ramos. Thank you for inviting me, our representative from CREP. And I got to see some of the instructional routines that are embedded in the illustrative math curriculum. And they're just amazing for students to talk about math. I'm so excited to implement this in my classroom. And I think the other teachers are excited too. We didn't talk about this as part of tonight's meeting, but I just wanted you to know that we looked at some traditional textbooks and some other open resources, and we hands down liked illustrative math the best. Any questions?
The faculty in general, math faculty in general, share your enthusiasm?
Actually, I asked among the 12 math teachers, I asked who would be interested in looking at last year we looked at just open resources, 2 open resources programs. And that was on a team of maybe 5 or 6 teachers. And then this year I got some actual like physical textbook samples. And I was when I was on maternity leave actually. So Dusty Kaiser went over all the resources with a team of, I think like 8 or 9. So like the majority of the math department got to look at these resources and put their stamp of approval on illustrative.
I have to say that how exciting that is, that there is a real consistent vision for mathematics and a real higher level application that's going all the way through the system. And that takes a lot of collaboration from the people who are in front of you. They are the leaders of that work, and they are the people who are collaborating behind the scenes to make sure that we have this kind of vertical thinking that goes forth. You can imagine the amount of change that we're asking our teachers to do in their learning, in their practice, and the way that they approach students. And, learning and then saying, and address the kids in front of you during a pandemic is a real challenge. So the leadership before you is real positive and can do. And I think that travels into our classrooms very effectively. So I want to thank them.
One other question. As this shift to conceptual and problem solving, I see opportunity, and I don't know if it's been discussed in your department, for including parents and families in this process, because where folks may not be comfortable with teaching the mechanics, every household has problems that can relate to mathematics, and being able to make those connections and to say, as you're looking to paint your rooms, there are problems here that you can involve your son or daughter in. It's just, it's a thought.
Thank you for that. When I was in my last district, I got a phone call from the outside. It was a citizen in the community who wanted me to figure out the square footage in his yard for an irregular garden. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Let me get the geometry team done.
And another thing, if you say that example, is just before the holidays, 6th grade just did a PBA on figuring out how much paint they would need to paint a room, and then how much it would cost them to get it based off of the square footage. So it was real life.
I'm going to talk a little bit about what's involved in getting ready to teach a unit, to teach a lesson, because it has been huge. The effort that teachers have made is remarkable. And the whole COVID part of it is significant because it does make it hard to speak to a group of kids. It makes it hard to collaborate, for the kids to collaborate, that type of thing. So this is a snapshot of a Google document that this is from 8th grade. So there's 3 math teachers working from this, and then our 2 special ed teachers working from it. And before a unit starts, what Stacy and I do is we populate this chart. So it's got the lesson, the bullets showing the main point of the lesson. Illustrative Math provides Google Slides, so I put that in. I like them. Rick doesn't like the way I like them, so Rick has his. And then Allison, the other member of my team, makes them from scratch because she feels like for her to completely understand what she's doing, she needs to do it from scratch. So we're doing it in different ways, that type of thing. But we also always come back to this and talk about it. Like I might peek at Rick's slides. Allison's slides are in our Google Drive. I can always go to them. In red, in the right-hand column, we have a note about our thoughts on this lesson for the next year. So I don't know who wrote that, but it was one of us, and just so we know that we're not going to remember next year, so we just put it in there as soon as it happens. Ahead of time, I put all the cool downs, which is like an exit slip that the program provides. I put that in GoFormative. We love having GoFormative, which is the online assessment tool that we have. The answers are just paper and pen. I've written all the answers, and that way we can provide them to the special ed teachers and the parents and for ourselves too, frankly. Because there's been a lot of learning. There's been content learning for us, which is fun for for math teachers. We like these problems, so we like learning new things in a different way. The amount of time that we get to meet in the middle school, 6th grade meets once a week during the day. 7th and 8th grade meet twice a week during the day. 7th and 8th grade have 2 different math courses. 6th grade has 1 math course, and then they have to meet for science the other day during the week. That is just the best part of our system as a math department, I think, that we can work collaboratively on such a regular basis is huge. When things are a little difficult for people, because it has been, change is hard. There's ups and downs. It is good to be able to vent and get ideas from other people, find out what worked, what didn't work. And those meeting times have been super important. We look at, because Stacey and I didn't get the meetings organized, we also make sure we're forward looking look at the assessment. So before we teach the unit, what are our goals, that type of thing. But those meeting times are very important and helpful.
This is the next steps and needed supports. So the PD that we have with Lindsay Ramos is super important, and we're continuing that. There are a couple more PD days this year that are already scheduled. We're looking to continue that into the summer to prepare the grade 8 and 9 teachers who are going to be starting it in algebra. And then in the fall, we're going to start implementing grade 7, 8, and 9. Beyond that, we'll continue the professional development to help teachers unpack the units and understand the instructional routines that are specific to illustrative math. So in order to do all this, of course, we need money. We are asking for your
And related to that professional development piece is really the coaching. Bridges was so successful at the elementary level because, as we implemented it, we had multiple coaches at that level. Our coaching stops are ending out right now at grade 6. And so it's really going to be important for 7th, 8th, 9th grade to have coaching support going forward.
Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention is that because this isn't a textbook, this isn't a system that has a textbook, it has consumables like workbooks for students. That's another expense that would be part of this program.
Yeah, I think both points are really good ones. That, of course, we're really excited to be learning and to be growing our practice, but of course, it takes not only the our commitment, but it also takes the commitment that we're going to support our teachers as they're having their own productive struggle, and they're helping students to get used to having productive struggle and not always just getting the scaffolding that they were used to get to the answer. So all of those strategies in the classrooms, that's what coaches do. They make sure that they're not only in front of it, talking at meetings and helping to coach people behind the scenes, but in front of the kids as well. When teachers are there taking risks and watching what happens and trying to refine their practice as they're going through change. So that is a whole additional role, and how we support our teachers when they do try to refine their practice. So at this point, I know we're almost out of time. I want to make sure that we have any last questions for the committee or anything that we can provide you with.
Any other questions from the committee? Yeah. Wendy, do we have people in the public? This is an opportunity for public to ask questions.
No one has their hands raised at the moment.
We just give it a moment.
No, it looks like no takers.
Okay, thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for the presentation. Very informative and, and enjoyable, I would say.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Adjourning at 5:28. 6:28.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah. Happy to see you. Good to see you too, Heather.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Joe.
Hello. How you doing? Happy New Year. Good job. Thank you. Worked out well. Good.
When the sun was out, it was okay earlier, but
Yeah. Yeah.